That morning, my retirement account was suddenly frozen. I called my son and asked why. He said coldly, "Dad, you're leaving soon anyway. Those things will be mine." My chest tightened. My life reduced to a countdown. My $350,000 retirement fund treated like a trophy. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I went straight to the bank and placed my ID on the counter. The banker reviewed the file, swallowed hard, and said, "Sir, this power of attorney was filed yesterday. With medical proof you're dying." She turned the screen toward me and my heart stopped. If this story speaks to you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps more than you think. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It means a lot to see this community grow worldwide. Quick clarification before we begin: some details in this story have been dramatized for educational and entertainment purposes. Any similarity to real individuals or situations is coincidental, but the message is intentional and important. The phone rang at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise through the window. At 67, I'd learned that calls before 8 a.m. usually brought one of three things: emergencies, bad news, or telemarketers with no respect for time zones. This wasn't a telemarketer. Mr. Garrett, Marshall Garrett. The voice was professional, careful, the kind of tone that makes your stomach tighten before you even know why. Speaking. I set my mug down on the counter. The coffee suddenly didn't taste right. "This is Kimberly Preston from First National Bank Fraud Prevention Department. I'm calling about suspicious activity on your retirement account." Suspicious activity. Those two words hung in the air like smoke. I'd built Garrett Construction Services from the ground up, spent 40 years pouring concrete and framing houses across Nashville. Every dollar in that account represented early mornings, late nights, and the kind of honest work that leaves your hands rough and your back aching. I'd been careful with it, hadn't touched a penny since I retired 3 years ago, except for the mandatory distributions the IRS required. What kind of activity? My voice came out steadier than I felt. An unauthorized withdrawal request for $85,000. It was flagged by our system this morning. 85,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was nearly a quarter of everything I had saved. I didn't request anything," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "I don't even know how to do that online. I'm barely comfortable checking my balance on the computer." There was a pause on the other end, not uncomfortable but measured. Kimberly Preston was choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Garrett, we understand that. That's why I'm calling. The request didn't come from you directly. A power of attorney document was filed with our bank 3 days ago, last Friday, October 14th. It grants someone else legal authority to manage your financial accounts. Power of attorney. I knew what that meant. Marianne and I had talked about setting one up years ago, back when we were planning for retirement together. But we never got around to it. And after she passed 5 years ago, I'd handled everything myself. There was no POA. There couldn't be. That's impossible," I said. "I never signed anything like that. I understand this is confusing, Mr. Garrett." Kimberly's voice remained calm, professional. "The document was notarized and submitted with supporting medical documentation, specifically a terminal illness hardship claim." The words stopped me cold. Terminal illness. "Terminal," I repeated. My hand went instinctively to my side, where 3 months of radiation treatment had left my skin tender. July, that's when Dr. Collier had given me the diagnosis. Prostate cancer, stage 1. Treatable. The prognosis was good. I'd been diligent about my appointments, hadn't missed a single radiation session. The doctor said I was responding well. "Yes, sir," Kimberly continued. "The medical letter states stage 4 cancer with a prognosis of 6 to 12 months, under IRS hardship provisions that allows for early withdrawal from retirement accounts without the standard penalties. Stage 4, 6 to 12 months. The kitchen felt suddenly too small, the morning light too bright. I'd been standing here 5 minutes ago thinking about whether to have oatmeal or eggs for breakfast. Now someone was telling me I was supposed to be dying. That's not true, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. I do have cancer, but it's stage 1. My doctor, Dr. Collier at Vanderbilt, he said I'm doing well. The treatment's working. I see. There was a rustling of papers on the other end. Mr. Garrett, I need to ask you something directly. Did you authorize anyone to file a power of attorney on your behalf? No, absolutely not. And did you provide any medical documentation to anyone for the purpose of accessing your retirement funds? No. My heart was pounding now, a sick, heavy rhythm. Who filed this? Who's trying to take my money? Another pause. Longer this time. The power of attorney names the authorized agent as Wesley Garrett. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Wesley, my son, my only child. The boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, to drive a stick shift, to measure twice and cut once. The young man who'd stood beside me at Marianne's funeral and gripped my hand so tight I thought his fingers would break. The same person I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. 2 years since he'd asked to borrow $30,000 for a business opportunity that never materialized. 2 years since I'd realized the money was gone and he had no intention of paying it back. 2 years since he'd stopped returning my calls, stopped showing up for Christmas, stopped being my son in any way that mattered. But this was different. This wasn't borrowing. This wasn't even stealing, not in the conventional sense. This was erasing me, declaring me terminal, making me disappear on paper so he could take what was left. Mr. Garrett, Kimberly's voice cut through the static in my head. Are you still there? I'm here, I managed. The transfer is scheduled to process today at 3 p.m. We've placed a temporary hold, but I need you to come into the branch as soon as possible. We'll need to verify your identity and document your statement that this power of attorney is fraudulent. I'll be there, I said. What branch? West End Avenue near Vanderbilt. We open at 9. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 7:51 a.m. An hour and 9 minutes until the bank opened. An eternity. I'll be there when the doors open, I said. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. And I'm sorry you're going through this. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen phone, still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car drove past. The world kept moving like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. My hand felt ice cold as I gripped the phone tighter. Not because I was afraid of losing the money, though $85,000 was a fortune to someone like me. No, it was something much worse, cutting through me sharp and clean as a blade. The name on that document, the person trying to take everything I had, was Wesley Garrett, my son. For 30 minutes, I sat at that kitchen table, staring at my phone. Wesley's number was still in my contacts. I'd never deleted it, though I'd thought about it 100 times. My thumb hovered over his name. Part of me wanted to believe there was some explanation, some mistake. But another part, the part that remembered how he'd looked me straight in the eye 2 years ago and promised to pay me back, that part knew better. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, he picked up. His voice was bright, almost cheerful. Too cheerful. Everything okay? The casualness of it made my jaw tighten, like we'd spoken yesterday. Like we hadn't spent 2 years in silence. The bank called me this morning. I said, keeping my voice level. There was a pause. Half a second too long. Oh, about the $85,000 you tried to take from my account. The silence on the other end stretched out. I could hear him breathing. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted, defensive, higher-pitched. Take Dad. It's not like that. I wasn't taking anything. I was arranging. You told them I was dying. Well, you are! His voice cracked, indignant. You have cancer. Stage 1, Wesley. I gripped the phone tighter. Stage 1. My doctor says at this rate I'll probably outlive you. Cancer spreads, Dad. You don't know. I know you forged my signature on a power of attorney. Another pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, searching for the next angle. A lawyer helped me with those documents, he said, trying a different tack. Maybe you signed them after a treatment when you were tired, confused. I've never signed anything. I've never been confused. And I'm not dying. The words came out harder than I intended, each one a stone dropping into water. I waited for him to argue, to keep lying, but instead his voice changed again, colder now, bitter. You don't understand. That money is going to be mine anyway, eventually. I'm just making sure it's handled properly. Handled? The word tasted sour. You mean stolen? It's not stealing. He was shouting now, the pretense completely gone. It's mine, I'm your only son. It's mine until I decide otherwise. You don't get it. His voice cracked with something that sounded almost like desperation. I need this money. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The deadlines, the word hung in the air. Deadlines, plural, urgent. What deadlines? I asked, genuinely caught off guard. What are you talking about? There was a beat of silence. When Wesley spoke again, his voice had retreated, flattened. Just bills, child support, life stuff. He'd caught himself, but not fast enough. I'd heard it, the panic underneath the fraying edges. Wesley, I'm not arguing about this anymore. He cut me off. You'll understand eventually. Click. The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the empty silence. My hand was shaking slightly. Not from anger, though there was plenty of that, but from something else. Something that felt like recognition. I'd heard that tone before. Years ago, when Wesley was 16 and came home at 3 a.m. with a story that didn't quite add up. When he was 22 and needed money for a business opportunity that fell through. When he was 37 and borrowed $30,000 with promises written in sand. It was the sound of someone in over their head. The thing is, I'd spent 40 years in construction. You learn to recognize when a structure is sound and when it's about to collapse. You learn to spot the cracks before they become catastrophes. And what I'd just heard in my son's voice was the sound of something cracking. That money is going to be mine anyway. The entitlement was there, sure. The same self-centered logic that had driven him to stop returning my calls 2 years ago when I'd asked about the loan. But underneath it, threaded through every word, was something sharper. Fear. The deadlines. Not deadline, deadlines. Multiple. Pressing. Like he was racing against something or someone. I stood up, my coffee long since gone cold on the counter. The clock read 8:22 a.m. The bank would open in less than 40 minutes. I needed to get down there, needed to document this fraud, needed to protect what was left of my savings before Wesley tried something else. But as I grabbed my keys and wallet, that conversation kept playing back in my mind. The way his voice had shifted, the desperation bleeding through the arrogance, the plural. What kind of pressure makes a man try to drain his dying father's bank account? What kind of deadlines? And why did taking my money seem like his only way out? I'd raised Wesley to be better than this. Marianne and I had taught him about honesty, hard work, treating people with respect. We'd given him opportunities. We never had college connections, a safety net when he stumbled. But somewhere along the way, the boy who used to help me measure lumber on Saturday mornings had become someone I barely recognized. Someone willing to declare me terminal to access my retirement. Someone who hung up rather than explain himself. Someone who sounded for just a moment genuinely afraid. I locked the door behind me and headed for the truck. The morning sun was higher now, bright and indifferent. Somewhere in this same city, Wesley was sitting with his phone, probably already planning his next move. Maybe calling his lawyer. Maybe panicking. The silence after the call felt louder than the argument itself. I sat there in my driveway, engine idling, replaying his words. The deadlines, he'd said. Not deadline. Deadlines. Plural. Urgent. Like he was running from something or toward it. Like time was running out. What pressure was my son really under? And why did stealing from me seem like his only option? At exactly 10 o'clock that Tuesday morning, I walked through the doors of First National Bank's downtown branch. I'd been inside this bank hundreds of times over 40 years, opening accounts, depositing payroll checks, signing the mortgage for our first house back in 1985. But I'd never walked into a bank to report my own son for fraud. The word felt strange in my mouth. Fraud. My son. Those two things didn't belong in the same sentence. But there I was. The lobby was busy with the mid-morning crowd, young professionals depositing checks on their phones, retirees waiting for tellers, the steady hum of transactions that keep a city moving. A greeter in a navy blazer approached me immediately. "Can I help you find someone, sir? I'm here to see Kimberly Preston. She's expecting me." The greeter's professional smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, maybe sympathy. She'd probably seen this before. Families imploding over money. "Right this way, Mr. Garrett." She led me past the teller stations through a door marked Private Banking and down a hallway lined with small offices. At the third door on the left, she knocked twice and stepped aside. "Come in," a voice called from inside. Kimberly Preston stood as I entered, extending her hand across a desk covered in carefully organized documents. She was younger than I'd imagined from her voice, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark suit that said professional without trying too hard. Her handshake was firm. "Mr. Garrett, thank you for coming in so quickly." "Thank you for catching this," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat down and immediately saw my name, my actual name, in my actual handwriting on documents spread across the surface, mixed in with papers that clearly weren't mine. "I've pulled everything related to the power of attorney filing," Kimberly said, settling back into her chair. "I want to walk you through exactly what was submitted so you understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." The full scope. That phrase made my chest tighten. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Medical letterhead, professional looking, with a signature at the bottom. But this was filed along with the power of attorney. It's from Chattanooga Medical Clinic. I picked it up and read, "Patient Marshall Garrett, DOB, date. Diagnosis, stage 4, metastatic prostate cancer. Prognosis, 6 to 12 months. Patient is unable to manage financial affairs independently. Family oversight recommended." The words swam slightly in front of my eyes. Stage 4, 6 to 12 months. Unable to manage financial affairs. I've never been to Chattanooga for treatment," I said quietly. "This is completely fabricated. Strida, I suspected as much when I heard how lucid you were on the phone this morning," Kimberly said. Her voice was gentle but matter-of-fact. She pulled another document from the pile. "The letterhead looks official, but there are inconsistencies. The clinic's address doesn't match state medical records. The physician's signature isn't in their database." She turned her computer monitor so I could see it. On the screen was a comparison, 2 signatures side by side. "This is the signature on the power of attorney," she said, pointing to the left side. "And this is your signature from when you opened your account with us 15 years ago." I leaned forward. The differences were obvious once you looked closely. The pressure of the pen, the slant, the way the G in Garrett looped differently. "That's..." I stopped my throat tight. "That's Wesley's handwriting. He's trying to mimic mine." Kimberly nodded slowly. "I thought so. You'd know better than anyone." "I would." I'd seen Wesley's handwriting his entire life homework assignments, when he was 8 college applications, at 17 the IOU he'd scribbled 2 years ago, promising to repay $30,000. That signature on the power of attorney was his attempt to copy mine, but a father knows his son's hand. The notary stamp is also present. Kimberly continued, but we'll need to verify that independently. If it's real, the notary may have been deceived. If it's fake, that's another layer of fraud. Another layer. Like this was a cake made of lies. Mr. Garrett. Kimberly said, her tone shifting slightly. There's more. Before the $85,000 request, there were 2 smaller transfers. She pulled up a transaction log on her screen and turned it toward me. October 12th, Friday. Outgoing transfer, $5,000. October 15th, Monday. Outgoing transfer, $10,000. Both went to an account under the name Legacy Investment Partners, LLC. What's that? I asked, though part of me already knew. Kimberly opened another window, a business registration database. It's a limited liability company filed in Tennessee in September 2022. Registered agent Wesley Garrett. The room felt suddenly smaller. September. A month before the first transfer. Before the power of attorney. Before any of this became real. He planned this. I said more to myself than to her. For weeks. It appears so, Kimberly said quietly. The smaller transfers were likely test runs, making sure the system would accept them, that the power of attorney would hold up under initial scrutiny. If those went through without flags, the larger amount would follow. I stared at the screen. 5,000, then 10, then 85. Escalating. Not a desperate, impulsive act. A calculated scheme. Kimberly cleared her throat gently. Mr. Garrett, I need to tell you something important. When we decline a transfer like this, we're required to notify the person who filed the power of attorney. That means Wesley will know probably within the next hour that we've caught this and placed a fraud hold. I'm telling you this because he may try to contact you. He already has, I said, this morning. Her expression shifted, concern maybe, or recognition. Then he'll likely escalate. People who commit financial fraud don't usually walk away quietly. Escalate. The word hung between us like a warning. What happens now? I asked. We've frozen all account access under the fraudulent power of attorney. Your money is secure. But the $15,000 that already transferred, that's more complicated. We'll need to work with law enforcement to potentially recover those funds, but there are no guarantees. $15,000. Already gone. Sitting in some account under a fake company name my son created. Kimberly slid a form across the desk. This is a formal fraud report. I'll need you to sign it, and then we'll file with both our internal security team and local authorities. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Not yet. One more thing, Kimberly said as I signed. You should consider contacting an attorney. Not just for financial protection, but for other safeguards. If Wesley was willing to go this far, you need to think about what else he might try. What else he might try. The pen stilled in my hand. Thank you, I said, for catching this, for calling me. It's my job, she said, but her eyes said something else. Something like, I'm sorry you're going through this. I stood, gathered the copies she'd prepared for me, and shook her hand again. We'll be in touch as soon as we have updates, she said. And Mr. Garrett, be careful. When I walked out of that bank, Kimberly's words echoed in my head. He'll likely escalate. The fraud hold was in place. The $85,000 was safe. But Wesley had already taken $15,000, had built a shell company in his own name, had forged documents declaring me terminal, and now he knew I'd caught him. What would my son do next? 2 days passed in uneasy silence. I jumped every time the phone rang and kept glancing out the window, half expecting Wesley's car. Then Thursday afternoon, around 4 o'clock, I heard the knock. Through the peephole, I saw my son and a man in a suit holding a briefcase. I opened the door halfway. Dad. Wesley's voice carried that practiced concern. Please, can we talk? I brought someone who can help us work this out. The suited man extended his hand. Mr. Garrett, I'm Landon Sterling. I specialize in family financial planning. Wesley mentioned there's been some misunderstanding. Well, there's no misunderstanding, I said. There's fraud. You see, Wesley turned to Sterling. This is what I mean. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. Every instinct told me to shut the door. But part of me, the part that still remembered teaching this boy to ride a bike, wanted to hear what he'd say. Against my better judgment, I stepped back. 5 minutes. They followed me to the kitchen table. The same table where I'd sat when Kimberly called. Landon set his briefcase down and pulled out charts, printouts, glossy folders. Chez Mr. Garrett, he began smoothly. With current inflation rates, money sitting in standard accounts loses purchasing power. At your age, you need growth strategies. I don't care about strategies, I interrupted. I care about why my son forged my name. Sterling's smile didn't falter. That's a strong word. Wesley was simply trying to help. By lying about me dying, Wesley leaned forward, hands clasped. Dad, I'm worried about you. The cancer, living alone, you're not eating right. My doctor says I'm doing fine. Doctors don't see everything. I see you struggling. I'm not struggling. I'm retired. This is what retirement looks like. Wesley shifted tactics. He knew exactly where to aim. Dad, Mom would want you to enjoy this time, not sit in this house counting pennies. The mention of Marianne hit like a blow. My jaw tightened. Don't bring your mother into this. But Wesley pressed forward. Mom always said you were too cautious, too afraid of risk. She'd want you to live a little, Landon added smoothly. Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman. Something hot rose in my chest. My wife is dead, and she wouldn't want her son committing crimes in her memory. Wesley's mask slipped a flash of frustration, of anger. Crimes. I'm trying to help you, and you're acting like I'm some kind of... You forged my signature. I stood up, my chair scraping. You lied about me being terminal. You already took $15,000. I'm ending this right here. Mr. Garrett, if you just listen, Landon started. Get out of my house. My voice came out flat and final. Both of you. Wesley stood slowly. The worried son expression was gone, replaced by something colder. You're making a mistake, Dad. You're going to regret being this stubborn. Is that a threat? And it's advice. You need help whether you admit it or not. And when you finally realize that I might not be in a position to offer it anymore. Landon gathered his materials quickly, professionally. They moved toward the door. I followed, making sure they left. At the threshold, Wesley turned back. Think about what I said, about what Mom would want. I closed the door before he could finish. The deadbolt clicked with a sound heavier than it should have. Through the window, I watched them walk to Wesley's car, newer than the one he'd had 2 years ago. Nicer than what someone struggling financially should drive. They talked at the curb heads close together before getting in. Across the street, Mrs. Palmer was watering her roses. She looked up, and our eyes met. She'd seen it all, Wesley and the slick lawyer, the tense body language, the way they left. She gave me a small nod. Mrs. Judith Palmer had lived across from us for 20 years. She'd brought casseroles when Marianne died. She didn't miss much. That evening, sitting alone in the house Marianne and I had bought 40 years ago, I kept replaying the conversation. The way Wesley had used her memory like a weapon. The way he'd tried to make me doubt my own judgment. You're not thinking clearly. You need help. That's what manipulators do. They make you question what you know is true. But I knew the truth. I'd seen the forged signature, the fake medical letter, the stolen $15,000. Those were facts, not confusion. What bothered me most Wasn't the gaslighting I'd dealt with enough dishonest contractors to recognize manipulation? What bothered me was how practiced it seemed. Like this wasn't Wesley's first time convincing someone that reality wasn't real. And that lawyer, Landon Sterling. Too smooth, too prepared. Like he'd done this before. Like he and Wesley had a system. I looked at the clock. 6:47 p.m. Kimberly had mentioned I should contact an attorney. Not just for financial protection, but for other safeguards. What else might Wesley try? My son hadn't come to apologize. He'd come to pressure me, to gaslight me, to make me doubt myself enough that I'd hand over control, which meant this wasn't over. After Wesley and his lawyer left, I sat in the kitchen as the sun went down. Didn't turn on any lights, just sat there in the gathering darkness thinking. I'd spent 40 years solving problems with my hands cracked foundations, leaking roofs, broken concrete. You fix what's broken. You rebuild what's collapsed. But sitting there, I realized you can't fix a broken sun with a hammer and nails. This problem needed different tools. Legal ones. I picked up the phone and dialed Walter Kingsley's number. Had it memorized, same number he'd had for 30 years. He answered on the second ring. Marshal, everything okay. Walter knew I didn't call at night unless something was serious. I need your advice, I said. Legal advice. I'm listening. I told him everything. The fraud attempt. Wesley's involvement. The $15,000 already gone. The confrontation that afternoon. Walter didn't interrupt good lawyer habit, just let me talk until I ran out of words. When I finished, there was a pause. Then his voice came through, gentle but clear. Marshal, this is serious. Forgery, identity theft, elder exploitation. These are felonies. He's my son, Walter. I know. I've known Wesley since he was born. But that doesn't change what he's done. The kitchen felt colder. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the same clock Marianne had hung there in 1988. What do I do? Walter's answer was careful, measured. You need to file a police report. I wouldn't say that if there were any other option. If I do that, he could go to prison. Yes, he could. And if you don't, he'll keep trying. He's already taken $15,000. He filed documents declaring you terminal. This will only escalate from here. I sat in silence, the weight of it settling on my shoulders. Let me ask you this, Walter said. If this were anyone else, a stranger, a business partner, anyone, what would you do? The answer came immediately. I'd call the police right away. Then you know what you have to do. My voice cracked slightly. What would Marianne want? Walter paused. When he spoke again, his tone was even gentler. Marianne would want you safe. She'd want you to protect yourself, even from Wesley. Hold on, I said. Don't hang up. I pulled up the non-emergency number for Nashville Metro Police on my phone, dialed with shaking fingers. Metro Police non-emergency line? I need to report identity theft and fraud. The victim is elderly, it's me. The perpetrator is a family member. There was a brief pause. I can send an officer to take a report. They'll be there within an hour. Or you can come to the station. I'll come there. I didn't want Wesley showing up if police came to the house. Detective Olivia Chambers handles financial crimes. I'll let her know you're coming in. I hung up and brought Walter's line back. I'm going to the station. Marshal, you're doing the right thing. Then why does it feel like I'm betraying my own son? Because you're a good father. Good fathers don't want to see their children face consequences. But sometimes consequences are the only thing left that can help. I drove to the police station in darkness. The building was institutional, fluorescent bright against the night sky. Inside a desk, Sergeant directed me to a small interview room. Detective Olivia Chambers arrived 15 minutes later, mid-40s, professional, but not cold. She shook my hand and sat across the table with a notepad and recorder. Mr. Garrett, I understand you're here to report financial fraud. Yes. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. My son is trying to steal my retirement savings. For the next 45 minutes, I walked her through everything. The power of attorney, the fake medical letter, the test transfers, the shell company. Wesley's visit that afternoon with the lawyer. Detective Chambers took notes, asked clarifying questions, never rushed me. When I finished, she leaned back and looked at me directly. Mr. Garrett, I want to be clear about what happens next. We'll investigate thoroughly. In cases involving family members, we move carefully. But if the evidence supports prosecution, we will file charges. This could result in serious criminal penalties for your son. I understand. Do you have copies of the fraudulent documents? I pulled out the folder Kimberly had given me at the bank. Detective Chambers reviewed each page carefully. This is good, she said. Clear documentation. The bank's fraud hold helps establish timeline. We'll need to verify the notary stamp contact the alleged medical clinic examine the signature forgery. She handed me her card. I'll be your point of contact. If Wesley attempts any further contact, you document it and call me immediately. Don't engage with him directly. What if he shows up at my house again? You tell him to leave. If he refuses, you call 911. Understood. I nodded. See how one more thing. Detective Chambers closed her notepad. In my experience, family financial crimes are among the hardest cases emotionally. What you're doing takes courage, but it's the right thing. 45 minutes later, I walked out with a case file number and Detective Chambers' card in my pocket. She'd been kind, but professional. We'll investigate thoroughly. If the evidence supports it, we will prosecute. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for a long time before driving home. Somewhere in Nashville, Wesley was probably asleep. He had no idea that by morning a detective would be examining every document, every transaction, every lie he'd told. Part of me, the father part, wanted to call and warn him, but I didn't. Because Walter was right. This had to stop. The email arrived at 6:30 the next morning. I'd barely slept, waking every hour to check my phone. The subject line read, "Delivery Confirmation, Marshall Garrett." I stared at it over my coffee. I hadn't ordered anything. But according to Premier Home Healthcare, someone thought I needed a hospital bed. I called the number immediately. A woman answered, cheerful and efficient. Premier Home Healthcare, this is Janet. This is Marshall Garrett. I received a delivery confirmation, but I never ordered anything. Typing sounds. Yes, Mr. Garrett. We have you scheduled for delivery this afternoon. Hospital bed, wheelchair ramp installation. I never ordered those. Who placed this order? Your healthcare proxy, Wesley Garrett, using a power of attorney. My grip tightened. That POA is forged. Cancel everything. Her voice shifted. I'll cancel immediately and flag the account. Sir, if this is elder abuse, we're mandated to report. I've already filed a police report. 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. Shop Mr. Garrett. This is Denise Harper from Horizon End of Life Services. I'm calling to schedule your hospice intake. Your son Wesley referred you ice water through my veins. Ma'am, I'm not dying. I'm not terminally ill. This is fraud. Silence. Then carefully. I have referral paperwork stating stage 4 cancer palliative care recommended. Completely false. My cancer is stage 1. I'm finishing radiation and doing well. Mr. Garrett, I'm so sorry. We'll close this file immediately and document this as fraudulent. Do you need us to report it? Already done. I set the phone down with shaking hands. Hospice. He'd referred me to hospice. Mid-morning, Detective Chambers called. Mr. Garrett, our cyber forensics specialist, examined the bank documents. We found something concerning. What? The medical records in that fake diagnosis letter contain details from your actual medical files. Someone accessed your patient portal at Vanderbilt Health. We traced the IP address to an apartment in Antioch registered to Wesley Garrett. The room felt airless. He broke into my medical records. Yes, multiple times over the past month, downloading everything. He used your real diagnosis to create a fake worse one. Nausea rolled through me. What else? Her tone grew more serious. Wesley filed a document with the Tennessee Department of Health, an advance directive designating him as your healthcare proxy. Effective immediately. I never signed that. I know. But it's in the state system. If you have a medical emergency, accident, heart issue, anything that leaves you unable to speak, the hospital's first call will be to Wesley. My chest tightened. He could make decisions about my treatment. Life-sustaining decisions, yes. Based on a document claiming you're terminal and only want comfort care. My voice barely whispered. So, if something happens to me, he would have legal authority. That's why we're escalating immediately. Contact Vanderbilt today. Lock down your medical records, require in-person verification for any changes, and file your own healthcare proxy, someone you trust. Walter Kingsley, my attorney. Good. Do it today. And Mr. Garrett. Until we make an arrest, be careful. No accidents. No situations where you might need medical intervention. The words hung after she ended the call. No accidents. I sat very still. Morning sunlight came through the same window where I'd been drinking coffee when the bank first called. Only 3 days had passed. 3 days, and my son had forged documents, stolen $15,000, created a fake medical history, and positioned himself to control whether I lived or died. I wasn't afraid of dying from cancer. Dr. Collier had been clear about my prognosis. What I was afraid of was what my son might decide for me, if I couldn't decide for myself. My phone buzzed. Walter called Vanderbilt. Appointment at 2 p.m. to secure your records and file new healthcare directive. I'll meet you there. I typed back, thank you. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled past. Mrs. Palmer waved from her porch. The world kept moving ordinary and normal while my son constructed an elaborate framework to erase me. Hospital bed, hospice care, medical records stolen and twisted. Healthcare proxy filed without my knowledge. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. About whether I would exist on my own terms or disappear into the lie Wesley had created. I thought about that 6:30 email. The hospital bed I never ordered. If I hadn't canceled, it would have arrived this afternoon. Workers would have installed it. Neighbors would have seen. Mrs. Palmer would have noticed. And Wesley's story that I was dying, needed care, couldn't manage my affairs, would have gained another layer of false credibility. Every piece fit together. The forged POA to access my money. The fake terminal diagnosis to justify withdrawal. The medical equipment to make it look real. The hospice referral to establish a paper trail. The healthcare proxy to control what happened if I ended up in a hospital for real. My son had built a cage around me piece by piece, but now I saw it. Detective Chambers saw it. And by this afternoon, my real healthcare directive would be filed with Walter's name where Wesley's fraudulent one sat. 3 days ago, I'd been a retired contractor drinking morning coffee. Now I was a man fighting to prove he was still alive. 10 days passed in unease. 10 days of barely sleeping, jumping at every call, constantly waiting for the next bad thing. Detective Chambers was investigating. Walter was filing protective orders. I'd changed all my medical portal passwords, notified every doctor's office. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Wesley hadn't stopped yet. Then, Monday afternoon, the certified mail arrived. The moment I signed for it, I knew. Legal documents have a weight to them, not just physical, but the weight of consequences. This envelope carried the heaviest kind. The return address was Davidson County Court. My hands were steady as I opened it, but my chest felt tight. The cover page read, Emergency Petition for Temporary Guardianship of Incapacitated Adult. Petitioner Wesley Garrett. Respondent Marshall Garrett. I read through Wesley's sworn statements. Subject suffers from terminal cancer with declining cognitive function. Refuses necessary medical care, hospice hospital equipment. Lives in unsafe conditions, evidence attached. Requires immediate protective supervision to prevent self-harm through neglect. Hearing scheduled November 14th. 2 weeks away. I flipped to the attached evidence. Photographs of my garage tools on my workbench, sawdust on the floor, old paint cans on shelves. My workshop. Normal. But Wesley had labeled it unsafe clutter. A statement from a concerned neighbor named Rita Coleman. I'd never heard of her. The signature looked practiced professional. Fake. An expert evaluation from an online cognitive test. Wesley had probably taken it himself, pretending to be me scoring it to show impairment. A letter from Landon Sterling identifying himself as family financial advisor, confirming Marshall's confusion about money matters. Every single piece was either truth twisted beyond recognition or outright lies. I drove straight to Walter's office with the petition. Didn't call ahead, just showed up. His secretary took one look at my face and waved me through. Walter read the petition in silence, his expression growing more serious with each page. When he finished, he set it down carefully. This is serious, Marshall. Emergency guardianship petitions get fast-tracked because courts worry about vulnerable elderly adults. But I'm not vulnerable. I'm not incapacitated. I know that, but we have to prove it. In court. In 2 weeks. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Here's what we need. First, a comprehensive cognitive assessment from Vanderbilt. Full neurological workup. We want it documented that you're mentally sharp. Done. Second, medical statement from Dr. Collier about your actual cancer prognosis and your behavioral competency. Not terminal, not declining. He'll do it. Now, third, character references. People who've known you for years. Former employees from Garrett Construction who can testify you ran a successful business for decades. I can get those. Fourth, Detective Chambers' forensic evidence showing Wesley's fraud. That proves he has motive to lie about your capacity. Walter looked at me directly. Marshall, if a judge grants this, even temporarily, Wesley becomes your legal guardian. He controls your medical care, your finances, where you live. Everything. Based on lies. Based on lies. But we have 2 weeks to prove their lies. And Wesley has a lawyer preparing to argue the opposite. The weight of it settled over me. What are my chances? Walter was quiet for a moment. Honestly, guardianship cases are hard to defend because courts err on the side of protection. If there's any doubt about your capacity, judges tend to grant temporary guardianship while they investigate further. Our job is to eliminate that doubt completely. And if we can't, then on November 14th, you lose the right to make your own decisions. Wesley becomes legally responsible for you. And once guardianship is granted, it's extremely difficult to reverse. I sat in Walter's office as the afternoon light faded outside. Through the window, I could see people walking past on the street, going to jobs, running errands, living their lives with the freedom to make their own choices. Freedom I might lose in 2 weeks. We fight, I said finally. Whatever it takes. Walter nodded. Whatever it takes. I'll start drafting our response tonight. You get that cognitive assessment scheduled for this week. The sooner we have documentation, the stronger our position. I stood to leave, then stopped. Walter, if we lose this, we won't. But if we do, if Wesley becomes my guardian, what happens to the criminal investigation? Walter's expression darkened. That's complicated. A guardian could potentially interfere with your cooperation as a witness, could claim you're not competent to testify. It would make prosecution much harder. So that was it. That was why Wesley had filed this petition now. Not just to control my life, but to sabotage the criminal case against him. Then we definitely can't lose, I said. That night, I stood in my garage, the garage Wesley had photographed and called unsafe. I looked at my workbench. The tools I'd used for 40 years, organized exactly how I wanted them. The birdhouse I was building for Mrs. Palmer, half finished. Sawdust on the floor because I'd been sanding this afternoon. This wasn't clutter. This was my life. And my son was trying to convince a judge I wasn't competent to live it. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to prove I was capable of making my own decisions. 2 weeks to stop my son from taking everything, not just my money, but my freedom. In the next 12 days, I learned something about truth. It takes a lot of work to prove it. Wesley had built his fortress of lies over weeks, maybe months. Now I had less than 2 weeks to tear it down. But I wasn't alone. Walter filed motions. Detective Chambers ran forensics. Dr. Collier wrote affidavits. And I took tests I never thought I'd need to take to prove I was exactly who I'd always been. Myself. November 3rd, Vanderbilt Medical Center. The neurological testing took 3 hours. Memory reasoning, problem-solving, spatial awareness. The specialist, Dr. Stuart Wallace, watched me work through puzzle after puzzle. Mr. Garrett, these tests are fairly rigorous. Take your time. I'd spent a lifetime solving problems, measuring angles, calculating loads, figuring out why a foundation cracked or a roof leaked. My mind was sharp because I'd used it every day for 40 years. When Dr. Wallace reviewed the results, he looked genuinely pleased. Cognitive function above average for age 67. No impairment detected. Full capacity for decision-making. He printed the formal assessment for court. As I stood to leave, he said quietly, "Between you and me, you're sharper than most 50-year-olds I test." November 5th, Dr. Collier's office. Dr. Collier pulled my entire medical file to write his affidavit. We sat in his office while he reviewed every scan, every lab result, every treatment note. He wrote methodically. Prostate cancer stage 1. Gleason's score 6. Diagnosed July 2022. Treatment initiated August 2022. Radiation therapy progressing well. Prognosis excellent. 5-year survival rate 95%. Expected lifespan into 80s or 90s with treatment. Current cognitive status fully intact, actively engaged in treatment decisions. At the bottom he added, "Mr. Garrett is one of my healthiest patients. His cancer is highly treatable. Claims of terminal status are medically false." "Will this be enough?" I asked. Dr. Collier looked at me over his glasses. "Marshal, any judge who reads this and still thinks you're incapacitated shouldn't be a judge." November 8th. Police Station Cyber Forensics Lab. Detective Chambers took me to meet Aaron Donovan in a room filled with computer equipment. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with the quick energy of someone who lived in screens. "Mr. Garrett, we executed a search warrant on Wesley's apartment last week. Seized his laptop." Aaron turned his monitor so I could see. Computer forensics on his device. Draft after draft of the forged POA. Multiple versions dated back to September. Medical letter templates saved, and browser history that made my stomach turn. September 15th. How to declare parent incapacitated in Tennessee. September 20th. Early inheritance laws without death. September 28th. Average lifespan stage 1 cancer. October 5th. Guardianship versus power of attorney, which is faster. September 15th, 2 months after my diagnosis. Wesley had started planning this the moment he found out I had cancer. "And here's something interesting," Aaron said, clicking into another folder. Handwritten notes. He photographed them and saved them. He pulled up images of journal pages. Wesley's handwriting, I recognized it immediately. September 12th. Dad says stage 1. Need to verify severity. If it progresses. September 25th. Researched POA requirements. Need medical records. Can fabricate. October 1st. Dad too stubborn to sign anything. We'll need different approach. October 8th. Time running short. Need $75,000 by November 1st for... The rest was scratched out, heavily impossible to read, even in the photo. October 10th. Bank transfer Monday. Dad won't even notice until too late. I stared at that partially visible line. Need $75,000 by November 1st for... What was he paying for? I asked. Detective Chambers shook her head. Still investigating. The redacted portion isn't readable even with image enhancement. But that date, November 1st, that's last week. So whatever deadline he was facing, he missed it, she confirmed. Which likely makes him more desperate now. Aaron added. We also contacted Monica Wesley's ex-wife. She's agreed to testify about his financial situation if needed. Child support obligations, debt history. I looked at the screen again. All those searches, all that planning. Starting the moment he learned I had cancer. Not asking how I was doing. Not offering support. Just calculating how to take everything before I died. Or convincing everyone I was dying faster than I actually was. Can I get copies of this? I asked. Money already printed for your attorney, Chambers said. This establishes premeditation fraud, elder exploitation. Combined with the medical assessments proving you're competent, it should be compelling evidence. November 12th, 2 days before the hearing. I sat at my kitchen table with Walter, surrounded by documents. Cognitive assessment. Dr. Collier's affidavit. Forensic reports. Character reference letters from 15 former employees at Garrett Construction, all testifying I'd run a successful business for decades with sound judgment. Everything I needed to prove I was competent. But I couldn't stop thinking about that line in Wesley's notes. Need $75,000 by November 1st for... The rest scratched out. The deadline passed. Whatever Wesley needed that money for, whatever pressure he was under, it hadn't gone away just because he missed the deadline. You're ready, Walter said, reviewing the files one last time. This is airtight. Then why do I feel like something's still wrong? Walter looked at me carefully. Because you're a father, and somewhere underneath all this fraud and manipulation, you're still hoping there's an explanation that makes sense. That makes your son someone other than who he's proven himself to be. He was right. Even now, even after everything, part of me wanted to believe Wesley had a reason. That he wasn't just stealing from his dying father, that there was some pressure, some circumstance that explained it. But the evidence didn't lie. The browser searches starting the day after my diagnosis. The cold calculation in those journal entries. The systematic fraud built piece by piece. My son had seen my cancer as an opportunity. I left the police station with a thick folder of evidence. Everything I needed to prove my competence. But I couldn't stop thinking about that scratched-out line. Need $75,000 by November 1st for... November 1st was a week ago. Whatever deadline Wesley was racing toward, whatever he needed that money for, he'd missed it. Which meant he was probably more desperate than ever. And desperate people don't stop. They escalate. The morning of the guardianship hearing, I woke at 5 o'clock and couldn't fall back asleep. I dressed in my only suit, the one I'd worn to Marianne's memorial 5 years ago. Standing in front of the mirror, tying my tie, I thought about the last time I'd been in a courtroom. 20 years ago, jury duty for a robbery case. I'd been so certain the system would deliver justice. Now I was walking into Judge Diane Thornton's courtroom, hoping that same system would see through my son's lies and let me keep my own life. Walter met me outside the Davidson County Courthouse at 8:30. The November morning was cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible. "So you ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." Inside the courthouse was all marble floors and echoing footsteps. We found Judge Thornton's courtroom on the 3rd floor, Family Law Division. Through the door's window, I could see Wesley already seated at the petitioner's table with Landon Sterling. He was wearing a dark suit, looking every inch the concerned son. When we walked in, Wesley's eyes met mine for half a second, before he looked away. Judge Thornton entered at 9 sharp. She was maybe 50, with the efficient bearing of someone who'd spent decades sorting truth from performance. We all rise? The Honorable Judge Diane Thornton presiding. We sat. The judge reviewed her files briefly, then looked up. This is an emergency petition for temporary guardianship of an allegedly incapacitated adult. Mr. Sterling, you may present your opening. Landon Sterling stood buttoning his jacket. Professional. Prepared. Joint all, Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking situation. Wesley Garrett loves his father, but Marshall Garrett is a 67-year-old cancer patient living alone, refusing medical care. He displayed photos on a screen. My garage, my workbench, tools and sawdust. My client is trying to protect his father before tragedy occurs. Walter stood for our response. Your Honor, this isn't protection. This is fraud. The cancer patient being referenced is beating his cancer. The unsafe conditions are a craftsman's working garage, and the concerned son has forged documents and stolen money. Judge Thornton's expression didn't change. I'll hear the evidence. Mr. Sterling, call your first witness. The petitioner calls Wesley Garrett. Wesley walked to the witness stand and was sworn in. He looked nervous, or was performing nervousness. I couldn't tell anymore. Landon led him through rehearsed testimony. I'm scared for my father. He hasn't been thinking clearly since the diagnosis. He refused end-of-life care when doctors recommended it. A lie. No doctor had recommended that. He forgets conversations, gets confused about money. I've seen him not know what day it was. Complete fabrication. His voice cracked with emotion. I just want him safe. A few people in the courtroom gallery, court observers, mostly looked sympathetic. Then Walter stood for cross-examination. Mr. Garrett, when was the last time you visited your father in person before filing this petition? Wesley hesitated. We talked on the phone. I asked when you last visited in person. It's been a while, maybe 2 years. 2 years. And in those 2 years, how many times did you call to check on him? Wesley was trapped. We were estranged. So you haven't seen your father in 2 years, rarely spoke to him, but suddenly you're so concerned for his welfare, you filed an emergency petition. I heard about the cancer. Yes, let's talk about that. You claim doctors recommended hospice care. Which doctor? Wesley stumbled. His oncologist. His oncologist is here today and will testify no such recommendation was ever made. So that was a lie, wasn't it? Objection. Landon was on his feet. Argumentative. Overruled, Judge Thornton said flatly. Answer the question, Mr. Garrett. Wesley's voice was barely audible. Maybe I misunderstood, or you lied. Did you unlawfully access your father's medical records? I didn't. We have forensic evidence showing you broke into his patient portal from your apartment. Did you then create fraudulent medical records claiming he was dying? Wesley sat in silence, looking at Landon desperately. Landon stood. My client invokes his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Walter smiled thinly. No further questions. Dr. Collier was brief and devastating. Sir Marshall Garrett has stage 1 prostate cancer. Excellent prognosis. Not terminal. Fully competent. I don't know where these hospice claims came from, certainly not from any legitimate medical source. Aaron Donovan presented forensic analysis, forged documents created on Wesley's laptop browser searches about declaring parents incapacitated. Timeline showing planning began the day after Marshall mentioned cancer. The cognitive assessment was entered into evidence. Marshall scored in the 90th percentile for his age. Judge Thornton reviewed the evidence. It took less than 5 minutes. Mr. Wesley Garrett, I've sat on this bench for 23 years. I've seen many cases of elder exploitation. This petition isn't just denied, it's one of the most brazen examples of manipulation I've encountered. She looked directly at Wesley. You hadn't seen your father in 2 years. You forged documents. You created false medical records. You broke into protected health information. This isn't concern. This is fraud. Her ruling was swift. Petition denied. A no-contact order is issued. Mr. Wesley Garrett is prohibited from contacting Marshal Garrett directly or indirectly. Then, the final blow. I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, attempted elder exploitation. These are serious charges. She turned to me. Mr. Garrett, you're free to continue living your life exactly as you choose. This court finds you fully competent. The gavel came down. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard him shout, "Dad, Dad." Wesley's voice echoed off the marble walls. I stopped, didn't turn around. Behind me, Bailiff Thomas Vance. Sir, there's a no-contact order. I don't care. Wesley's voice broke. Dad, please, are you really going to destroy me? Your only son. That's when I turned around. Looked at him standing there, 39 years old, face flushed, red eyes wild. Where was the boy who'd helped me build his first birdhouse when he was 8? The teenager who'd worked construction summers to learn the trade. I didn't see him. I saw a stranger. I'm not destroying you, Wesley, I said quietly. You're doing that yourself. Then I walked away, and it felt exactly like what it was leaving a piece of my own heart behind. 3 days after the hearing, I started breathing easier. The no-contact order was in effect. Walter said criminal charges would be filed within weeks. Detective Chambers called to say the investigation was progressing. For 3 days, the phone didn't ring with threats. Wesley didn't show up. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally given up. Then Friday night at 11 o'clock, I heard glass breaking in my garage. I was in the living room, TV on low, couldn't sleep, watching late news. The crash came from the garage, sharp and distinct. Glass shattering, metal clattering. My first thought, burglary. I grabbed my phone and the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Moved quietly to the door leading to the garage. Opened it slowly, shining the light inside. The beam caught him immediately. Wesley, standing in my garage, frozen in the flashlight like a deer on a dark road. A small window was broken, that's how he'd gotten in. He had a cardboard box, half filled with my things, vintage tools from my first job site, the coin collection, from Marianne's father, that I kept in the glass cabinet, small power tools. Wesley, what are you doing? His eyes were wild, frantic. I need this, Dad. Don't you understand? I'm losing everything. The words came out raw, desperate. This wasn't the calculated manipulator from the courtroom. This was someone completely unraveling. So now you're stealing from me, breaking into my house. You don't understand. Wesley's voice cracked. I used to be somebody. I had respect, a career. Now I'm a failure. So you break into your father's garage in the middle of the night. Wesley's voice went higher, almost hysterical. What am I supposed to do? You won't help me. The bank won't release the money. I have nothing left. You could have asked for help before all this started. Wesley laughed bitterly. Ask you so you could judge me. Tell me I'm irresponsible. I know what you think of me. Well, I thought you were my son, and you chose to rob me instead of talking to me. Wesley's desperation showed through completely now. I'm not robbing. I need... He couldn't finish the sentence. Knew he was wrong. In his frustration, Wesley shoved my toolbox off the workbench. Not at me, just venting rage at objects. Tools crashed to the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the quiet night. Then, through the garage window, sudden flashing blue and red lights. Wesley's face, realization of what he'd done. Mrs. Palmer's voice outside. Officers, he's in the garage. I saw him break the window. Officer Anthony Blake stepped into the garage, hand near his weapon. "Metro Police, let me see your hands." Wesley raised his hands, started crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Blake moved between us. "Sir, step away from the homeowner." "Mr. Garrett, are you injured?" I shook my head. "No, I'm fine." Blake saw the broken window tools scattered, Wesley clearly caught in the act of stealing. "You're under arrest for burglary violation of a no-contact order." As Blake cuffed Wesley's hands behind his back, Wesley looked at me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." His voice was broken, genuine. Not the performance from the courtroom, just raw desperation. I couldn't answer. Just stood there watching. Blake read Wesley his rights while guiding him toward the door. Wesley didn't resist, didn't argue, just kept his eyes on the floor. Mrs. Palmer appeared in the garage doorway wrapped in a bathrobe. "Marshall, are you all right?" "I'm okay, Judith." She put a hand on my shoulder. "I called as soon as I saw someone breaking your window. I keep an eye out, you know. Thank you." Blake led Wesley outside to the patrol car. Through the garage door, I could see him placing Wesley in the back seat. My son, in handcuffs, in a police car. Mrs. Palmer stayed with me as I gave Officer Blake my statement. The broken window, the stolen items, the no-contact order that had been violated. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to press charges formally," Blake said. "This is burglary theft violation of a protective order, on top of the pending fraud investigation." "I understand. And Mr. Garrett, you might want to get a security camera system, just in case." "I have one," I said quietly. "It recorded everything." Blake nodded. "Good. We'll need that footage." They drove Wesley away in the back of the patrol car. Through the window, I could see his face, no more anger, no more performance. Just brokenness. His lips moved, and though I couldn't hear through the glass, I knew what he was saying. "I'm sorry, Dad." I stood there in my driveway, Mrs. Palmer's arm around my shoulders, watching the taillights disappear down the street. My son was going to jail, and part of me, the father part, wanted to run after the car. Wanted to say I wouldn't press charges, wanted to somehow fix this. But my feet wouldn't move, because this wasn't fixable. Nothing about this was fixable, and I didn't know if it ever would be again. But before I tell you the secret, Wesley tried to hide the one that drove him to the edge. Type "continue" in the comments if you're still watching. I need to know you're here with me. And a quick note, the details I'm about to share are partly reconstructed from case files and testimonies. Not everything can be fully authenticated. If that makes you uncomfortable, feel free to stop the video now. I hadn't slept the night Wesley was arrested, or the night after. By Sunday morning, I'd given up trying. At 7 a.m., I was sitting in my kitchen, the same spot where everything started 4 weeks ago when Detective Chambers knocked on my door. One look at her face, and I knew this wasn't a routine update. She was holding a thick file folder, and when she sat down at my table without waiting to be invited, I knew. Whatever was in that folder was going to change everything. "Mr. Garrett, the district attorney's office will be filing formal charges this week." She spread documents across my table. A list of charges, each one carrying weight I could almost feel pressing down on the paper. Identity theft. Class D felony, forgery of instruments. Class E felony, financial exploitation of elderly. Class C felony. Attempted theft, over $60,000. Class B felony, violation of no-contact order. Contempt of court. Attempted theft of property. Class E felony. Combined potential sentencing, 8 to 15 years state prison. My voice came out quiet. 15 years. He'll be 54 when he gets out. Chambers leaned forward carefully. "Mr. Garrett, when we executed the search warrant on Wesley's apartment Friday night, we found additional evidence. Financial records we hadn't seen before. Text messages. Documents." "What documents?" She pulled out bank statements, loan contracts, printed text messages. Your son's financial situation was worse than we initially understood. Much worse. The gambling debts. Chambers laid it out systematically. Kumate we knew about the $45,000 in credit card debt and overdue child support. But there's more. An additional $80,000 owed to informal lenders. She showed me bank statements. Transfers to sites like BetKing Offshore, Sport Wagers International. Starting 2 years ago, small bets $50 here and there. Then escalating, hundreds, thousands per game, losing consistently, borrowing to cover losses, the classic spiral. When legitimate credit dried up, he turned to loan sharks. The threats. Now look at these. Text messages recovered from Wesley's phone records. August 15th. You owe $45,000. Make a plan to pay, or we visit your workplace. September 3rd. Final courtesy notice. Totals $80,000 now. Pay $75,000 by November 1st, or we escalate. September 20th. Nice house your dad has. Antioch Road. Be a shame if something happened. October 15th. November 1st deadline stands. We don't negotiate. October 28th. 72 hours. You know what happens if you don't pay. I stared at the dates. The September 20th threat was the day before Wesley started searching how to declare parent incapacitated. They threatened him. They threatened me. Yes, and they gave him a deadline. November 1st. That's the need $75,000 by November 1st for line in his notes that you saw. She showed me Wesley's payment schedule document found in his apartment. Total needed $125,000. Plan withdraw dad's account. $85,000 plus $15,000 already taken equals $100,000. Pay creditors $75,000, deadline November 1st. Remaining $25,000, clear credit cards, back child support. My hands shook as I read it. Every number, every calculation. My retirement savings divided up like inventory. Mr. Garrett, these people are dangerous. Not movie dangerous, real dangerous. They found where he worked, where his family lived. Wesley was genuinely scared. I sat in silence for a long time. Then, does this change the charges? No. Wesley still committed fraud, but it explains the urgency. Why he moved so fast after your cancer diagnosis. He saw your illness as a deadline to meet their deadline. I thought about Wesley's panic in the garage. I'm losing everything. So when I got cancer, I became his way out. Yes, a quiet anger rose in me. Detective, if someone held a gun to Wesley's head and said, "Rob your father or we'll kill you," I'd have sympathy. But that's not what happened. Chambers waited. He gambled. He lost. He borrowed from criminals. Then he had choices: declare bankruptcy. Come to me honestly. Face the consequences of his own mistakes. Ask his father for help. My voice hardened. Instead, he looked at his sick father, looked at me, and decided I was the solution to his problems. Not as a person, as a bank account. That's a fair assessment. I stood paced. The people who threatened him, are they still a danger? No. Wesley's in custody with no money. They've moved on to other targets. They're pragmatic, won't waste time on someone broke and in jail. I called Walter on speaker. My marshal. I just got the report from Detective Chambers. The gambling debts. I know. Walter, do the charges change, Karina? Legally, no. But the defense will use this. They'll argue desperation, not malice. A jury might sympathize. Will the prosecution address this at trial? Yes. They'll present it as motive and a pattern of poor decision-making. The defense will present it as mitigating circumstances. What do you think? Walter was careful. I think your son dug a hole and decided to bury you in it to climb out. My voice was firm. The charges stand. All of them. And Walter. I want you to tell the DA I'll address this in my victim impact statement. Not to excuse Wesley, but because the jury needs to understand he had choices, and he chose the worst one. After Detective Chambers left, I sat with that evidence file. Text messages from criminals threatening my son. Bank statements showing 2 years of gambling losses. Payment schedules where Wesley calculated how much of my money would pay which debt. Part of me understood now. The panic, the desperation, the feeling of being cornered. But understanding doesn't mean forgiveness, and it certainly doesn't mean excuse. Wesley was in trouble, real trouble, even dangerous trouble. But when he looked at his options, he didn't see ask Dad for help, declare bankruptcy, face consequences honestly. He saw steal from Dad while he's sick. That's the choice I couldn't forgive. Not the gambling, not even the debts. The choice to make me a victim instead of asking me to be his father. Time has a strange weight when you're waiting for your son to go on trial. Days drag and feel empty. Nights are worse. I kept myself busy small projects in the garage where Wesley had broken in, replacing that window myself, going to radiation appointments like clockwork. Dr. Collier said the cancer was responding beautifully. "You're beating it, Marshall," he told me in mid-December. I nodded and thanked him, but it felt strange winning one battle while losing another. Thanksgiving week. The last treatment. "Your latest scans look excellent," Dr. Collier said, reviewing my charts. "The cancer is in remission. You're going to be fine, Marshall." That's good news. He heard something in my voice. Everything else okay? My son goes on trial in January for trying to steal my money because he thought I was dying. So now I'm healthy and he's in jail. It's complicated. Dr. Collier's expression shifted. "I'm sorry, Marshall. I can't imagine." I drove home thinking 6 months ago a doctor told me I had cancer. I thought that was the worst news I'd get this year. Early December, Monica's call. Monica called on a Wednesday afternoon. First time we'd spoken directly since the arrest. "Marshall, I hope it's okay to call. I wanted to check on you." "I'm managing. How are Isabel and Lucas?" she sighed. "That's why I'm calling. They're asking questions I don't know how to answer." "What questions?" "Isabel asked why Grandpa is mad at Daddy. Lucas asked if Daddy did something really bad, that's why the police took him." I don't know what to tell them that's age-appropriate but honest. I chose my words carefully. "What have you told them?" "That Daddy made wrong choices about money. That every choice has consequences. That Grandpa still loves Daddy even though Daddy hurt him." My throat tightened. That's right, Monica. Now Isabel asked if you'll ever forgive him. I was honest. "I don't know yet, but tell her I'm trying. The trial is January, right? January 9th, 6 weeks. I won't bring them. They don't need to see their father in court like that." "Thank you. That's the right call." Monica paused. "Marshall, for what it's worth, I had no idea about the gambling. When we were married, I thought it was just sports. Didn't know it had gotten that bad. If I'd known, you would have left him sooner. I know. You did right protecting yourself and the kids." Christmas night, alone with the what-ifs. Mrs. Palmer invited me to dinner. I declined. Spent Christmas alone in the house, looking at an old framed photo of Wesley, maybe 10 years old, helping me in the workshop. I couldn't stop thinking about those text messages from the loan sharks. "Ha, nice house your dad has. Be a shame if something happened." Wesley sitting across from dangerous men, knowing he was in deep trouble. And instead of reaching for help, he reached for my wallet. If he'd come to me in September when the threats started, would I have helped? Yes. Been angry? Absolutely. Judged him? Probably. But would I have found a way? A loan, bankruptcy advice, something. The answer was yes. You were drowning, I said to the empty room. And you didn't reach for me. You reached for my wallet. That's what I couldn't forgive. Not the gambling. Not even lying to criminals. What I couldn't forgive was that when he had the chance to be honest with me with his father, he chose fraud instead. New Year's Day, trial date confirmed. My phone rang at 10 a.m. Walter. Marshall trials confirmed. January 9th. Judge Diane Thornton presiding, same judge from the guardianship hearing. That's next week. Yes. The DA's office will send you the schedule. You'll testify victim impact statement. Are you ready? I don't know. How do you prepare to testify against your own son? You tell the truth. That's all you can do. What's the DA expecting for sentencing if he's convicted, Tompu? With the charges, the elderly victim factor, the no-contact violation, probably 4 to 6 years eligible for parole after serving part of it. 4 years, he'll be 43. Yes. Marshall, the district attorney, Catherine Monroe, she's good. Experienced with elder exploitation cases. She wants to meet with you before trial to prepare your statement. Okay. And Marshall, you should know, the DA asked if you'd consider writing a letter to the judge about sentencing. You're not required to. But if you want to request leniency or treatment programs, you can. I thought about the gambling, the threats, the what-ifs. I'll think about it. After Walter hung up, I looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall. January 9th, circled in red ink. Walter had sent me the subpoena weeks ago. 8 days. In 8 days, I'd walk into a courtroom and watch prosecutors present evidence of my son's crimes. Watch defense attorneys try to explain them away. And then I'd take the stand and tell a judge and jury what those crimes had cost me. Not just money, not just fear, betrayal, loss of trust, the destruction of whatever relationship we had left. I still hadn't written that letter to the judge. Still didn't know if I would. Because I didn't know if I wanted mercy for Wesley or if I wanted justice. Maybe I wanted both. Maybe I couldn't have both. Maybe that's what it means to be a father when your son becomes a criminal. The morning of the trial, I woke before dawn and couldn't fall back asleep. I'd built things my entire life, homes for families, additions for growing businesses, even helped build the elementary school where Isabel goes. Standing outside courtroom 3A that January morning, I realized I was about to watch prosecutors build something else, a case that would send my son to prison. And unlike the buildings I'd made, this one wouldn't shelter anyone. Walter met me outside. You ready? No. Inside, Judge Thornton sat at the bench. Wesley was already at the defense table with Landon Sterling wearing a suit. He looked smaller somehow, defeated before it started. He glanced my way once. I didn't look away. Neither did he. Then he dropped his eyes. The jury filed in 12 ordinary people who would decide my son's future. Judge Thornton called court to order. Catherine Monroe stood for opening statements. Late 40s, professional without theatrics. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about betrayal. Not between strangers, but between father and son. She laid it out methodically. Marshall Garrett, 67, retired widowed cancer patient, stage 1, treatable, excellent prognosis. When he told his son about his diagnosis, a loving child would have offered support. Wesley Garrett saw an opportunity. Forged POA, fake medical records, stolen money, attempted guardianship. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated exploitation of a vulnerable elderly person who happened to be his father. Landon's opening was smoother, more emotional. The prosecution will paint Wesley as a monster, but he's a man who made terrible mistakes facing a crisis of his own. You'll hear about gambling, debts, threats, fear. Context doesn't excuse what Wesley did, but it explains it. Catherine called her first witness. Kimberly Preston from First National Bank, the woman who'd called me that Tuesday morning 4 weeks ago. After being sworn in, she explained her role in fraud prevention. On October 18th, a withdrawal request for $85,000 triggered our alert system. She walked the jury through it. The forged power of attorney. The fake medical letter. Signature comparisons showing clear forgery. Did Marshal Garrett authorize this? Catherine asked. No. He was confused and alarmed. He didn't even know how to transfer money online. Landon tried minimizing on Cross. But the transfer was blocked. The $85,000 was blocked. But two previous transfers, $5,000 and $10,000, had succeeded. $15,000 total was taken before we caught it. Dr. Collier was next. The man who'd told me I had cancer, guided me through treatment, celebrated my remission. Now here to explain my son had lied about my illness. Catherine established his credentials. What is Marshal Garrett's actual diagnosis? Stage 1 prostate cancer. Gleason score 6. Highly treatable. 5-year survival rate 95%. With treatment which he's completed, he could easily live into his 80s or 90s. Catherine showed him a document. Have you seen this medical letter? His jaw tightened. No. This claims stage 4 cancer with 6 to 12 months prognosis. That's medically false. Why? Stage 4 means metastasized to other organs. Mr. Garrett's was localized. The terminology is wrong. The staging is wrong. The clinic doesn't exist. This is fabricated. Is Marshal Garrett terminally ill? Absolutely not. He's in remission. The third witness was Aaron Donovan, cyber forensics. Younger than I expected, maybe 30, with the intense focus of someone who lived in screens. He explained finding drafts of forged documents and browser searches on Wesley's laptop. Catherine projected them for the jury. How to declare parent incapacitated in Tennessee. Early inheritance without death. Terminal cancer average lifespan. Dated September through October. When was Marshall diagnosed? Catherine asked. July 2022. The searches began 2 months after diagnosis. Then she moved to finances. Did you find evidence of the defendant's financial situation? Yes. $45,000 in credit card and child support debt. Plus $80,000 owed to loan sharks from sports gambling. My chest tightened. Here it was. Did you find communications from these lenders? Text messages appeared on screen. You owe $45,000. Make a plan or we visit your workplace. Pay $75,000 by November 1st or we escalate. Nice house your dad has. Be a shame if something happened. Chakin Pudu. When did the defendant start researching access to his father's money? September 20th? The same day he received a threat mentioning his father's house. So his planning coincides with his debt deadline. Yes. Evidence shows he viewed his father's cancer as an opportunity to resolve gambling debts. Catherine introduced the final piece, Wesley's handwritten notes. To dad too stubborn. We'll need legal approach. Need $75,000 by November 1st for scratched out. Bank transfer Monday. Dad won't notice until too late. The payment schedule. $85,000 from Dad, plus $15,000 taken equals $100,000. Pay creditors $75,000. Remaining $25,000 for other debts. The jury passed the documents around. I watched their faces change. One older woman looked from the papers to Wesley with clear disappointment. Wesley kept his eyes down. Wouldn't look at anyone. Catherine rested after noon. Judge Thornton called recess until tomorrow. The defense will present its case at 9 a.m. As the jury filed out, I studied their expressions. They'd seen the evidence, heard the witnesses, read the threatening texts. Some looked sympathetic. Wesley had faced dangerous people, but more wore expressions that said they couldn't reconcile it. Yes, he'd been desperate. Yes, he'd been threatened. But when he looked at his options, he hadn't seen ask Dad for help, declare bankruptcy, face consequences honestly. He'd seen steal from Dad while he's sick. Tomorrow, Wesley would take the stand and try to explain. And I'd have to sit there and listen to whatever story he told about why he did this to me. The second day of the trial, I arrived early and sat in the same spot, back row of the gallery aisle seat, so I could leave if I needed to. Walter had warned me the night before. Tomorrow's going to be hard, Marshall. Landon's going to let Wesley tell his story. It's going to sound sympathetic. Remember, empathy doesn't change what he did. I had nodded then. But sitting in that courtroom on Tuesday morning, waiting for my son to take the witness stand, I wasn't sure I could remember anything except that he was still my son. The bailiff called the court to order at 9 o'clock sharp. Judge Thornton entered. We stood, we sat. The familiar ritual felt hollow this time. Landon Sterling stood and announced the defense would call Wesley Michael Garrett to the stand. I watched Wesley rise from the defense table. He wore a navy suit I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from Landon, or bought specifically for this. His hands shook as he approached the witness box. The bailiff swore him in, and Wesley's voice cracked on the word, "do." "Please state your name for the record," the bailiff said. "Wesley Michael Garrett." Landon approached the witness box with a folder in his hands, his expression soft, almost fatherly. He set the folder down and gave Wesley a small nod of encouragement. "Okay, Wesley, I know this is difficult," Landon began. "But I need you to tell the jury what happened, in your own words." Wesley glanced at me. Our eyes met for less than a second before he looked away. He swallowed hard and began. I panicked. When my dad told me he had cancer, Landon let the silence hang for a moment. "Why did you panic?" "My mom, Marianne." Wesley's voice wavered. "She had cancer. They said they caught it early, too. And then, she was gone within 2 years." His eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't lose Dad, too. I couldn't." I felt my chest tighten. Marianne's death had destroyed both of us, but I hadn't turned that grief into a weapon. Landon moved forward gently. "Tell the jury about your financial situation at that time." Wesley wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I had a gambling problem. Sports betting. At first it was small, just games with friends. Then online. Then offshore sites. Then I was betting thousands." The shame on his face looked real. "I lost. A lot. I borrowed from credit cards. Then from private lenders when the cards maxed out." "How much did you owe?" Landon asked. "Total about $125,000. And the people I owed the last $80,000 to, they weren't patient. They weren't legal." "Were you threatened?" "Yes." Wesley's voice broke. "They said they'd come to my work. They mentioned my kids. They mentioned my dad's house." Landon paused, letting the jury absorb that. "How did that make you feel?" "Terrified. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I felt like the walls were closing in. I wanted to feel sympathy. Part of me did. But another part, the part that had sat in Kimberly Preston's office and learned my son had forged my signature and declared me terminally ill, that part stayed cold." Landon continued. "When your father told you about the cancer, what went through your mind?" Wesley started crying again. I thought he was dying, like Mom. And I thought, if he died, the money would go through probate. Take forever. Lawyers would take a big chunk. And I'd lose my kids, my house, maybe worse, before I could even touch it. So what did you do? I told myself I was just protecting what was going to be mine anyway. That I wasn't stealing, just getting ready. Landon's voice softened further. "Do you understand now that was wrong?" Wesley collapsed into sobs. "Yes. God, yes. I lied to myself. I was desperate and scared, and I turned my dad into a solution to my problems instead of asking him to be my father." I watched the jury. A few of them looked moved. Others looked skeptical. They were trying to decide if this was genuine remorse or a performance. Landon pressed on. "When did you realize you'd gone too far?" "Night at the hospital. When I showed up at Dad's radiation appointment, and the way he looked at me. Like he didn't know who I was. Like I was a stranger. Wesley turned toward the jury, his face red and wet. I became someone my own father had to be afraid of. Someone who lied, forged documents, tried to declare him incapacitated. He looked at me again. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't move. I didn't nod. I just sat there frozen. Landon concluded his direct examination, and Judge Thornton asked if the prosecution wished to cross-examine. Catherine Monroe straightened her blazer, and walked toward the witness stand. Her expression wasn't angry, just focused. Well, Mr. Garrett. She began calmly. You testified that you panicked when your father got cancer. When did he tell you about the diagnosis? July, late July. And when did you first illegally access his medical records? Wesley hesitated. September. So you had 2 months between the diagnosis and the fraud. During those 2 months, did you ever ask your father for help? No. Did you tell him about the gambling debts? No. Did you tell him dangerous people were threatening you? No. Why not? Wesley looked trapped. Because I was ashamed, and I thought he'd judge me. Catherine tilted her head slightly. Or because you thought he'd say no to giving you $85,000. Maybe both. Catherine walked back to the prosecution table and picked up a printout the browser history Aaron Donovan had testified about yesterday. She held it up for the jury to see. Mr. Garrett, you said you panicked and saw your father's money as yours already. But the evidence shows something else. You researched how to declare a parent incapacitated. You created forged documents, multiple drafts. You opened a shell company. You made test wire transfers. Does that sound like panic or planning? Wesley's voice dropped to a whisper. Planning. I planned it. You mentioned your children being threatened. Your payment schedule shows $75,000 going to gambling creditors. What about your father? His medical care? His future? I didn't think about that. Stikon. You didn't think about leaving your 67-year-old father with cancer with less money for treatment so you could pay off gambling debts. Wesley looked down at his hands. No, I didn't think about him. I only thought about myself. Catherine paused, letting that admission settle over the courtroom. Then she asked her final question. Ma, one more thing. You said you thought your father was dying like your mother. But your father's doctor testified yesterday, stage 1, excellent prognosis. Did you really believe he was dying? Or did you want to believe it because it made stealing easier? Wesley sat silent for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I wanted to believe it. I convinced myself. Because if he was dying anyway, then what I was doing felt less wrong. Baktapisakan, so you chose a lie that served you over a truth that would have saved your relationship with your father. Yes, Catherine nodded once. No further questions, Your Honor. When Wesley stepped down from the witness stand, his eyes found mine one more time. Red-rimmed, shattered, begging for something I didn't know if I had to give. The bailiff led him back to the defense table. He sat down, shoulders collapsed. Landon Sterling whispered something to him. Wesley nodded without hearing, and I sat there realizing I had just watched my son confess not just to the charges, but to the thought process behind them. He had chosen easy lies over hard truths, chosen my money over asking for my help, and now he wanted me to forgive him, tell the judge to be lenient. I didn't know. Because tomorrow it would be my turn to testify. My turn to tell a courtroom full of strangers what it felt like to have your own son treat you like an ATM instead of a father. Wednesday morning, the third day of the trial, I woke up and couldn't swallow breakfast. Walter had helped me prepare a statement, 2 pages, typed key points, bolded. But when I drove to the courthouse, I left those pages on the passenger seat. When Judge Thornton called my name, I walked up to the witness stand with empty hands and a full heart. Sometimes the only way to tell the truth is to just say it. The bailiff swore me in. Judge Thornton nodded. Mr. Garrett, you may address the court. I looked at the jury. 12 faces waiting. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, I've thought for weeks about what I'd say here. I even wrote it down, practiced it. But sitting here now looking at my son, I don't remember any of those words. I gripped the armrest. I'm not good at speeches. I was in construction. Concrete, wood, things you can see and touch. But I tried to build a person too. My son. When Wesley was 8 years old, he found a wallet at school. Had $40 in it. He came home excited, wanted to keep it, buy himself a bike. I told him no. We had to find the owner. He cried. Said it wasn't fair. A faint smile crossed my face. We found the man who'd lost it. He was grateful, gave Wesley $10 as a reward. And Wesley, 8 years old, he looked up at me and said, "Dad, doing the right thing feels really good." My voice caught. I was so proud of him that day. I thought I'd taught him something that would last. I don't know when that changed. I looked at Wesley. He had his head down, shoulders shaking. See, during this trial, I've learned things about Wesley I never knew. The gambling, the debts, the threats from dangerous people. Part of me wishes he'd come to me when those threats started, before the lies, before the forgery. My voice grew firmer. Would I have been angry? Yes. Disappointed? Absolutely. Would I have judged him for gambling away money? Maybe. But would I have helped him find some way through it? Yes. Because that's what fathers do. My hands tightened. But Wesley didn't come to me as a son asking his father for help. He came at me like someone sizing up a target. When I told him about my cancer, he didn't think, how can I support Dad? He thought, how can I use this? I had to stop. The courtroom was silent. He looked at me, his sick father, and saw a deadline that matched his deadline. Saw a solution to gambling debts. Saw an opportunity. I wiped my eyes. Your Honor, I'm a widower. My wife Marianne died 5 years ago. Wesley and I were already distant then, but after she passed, we barely spoke. Then I got cancer. Stage 1. Treatable. The doctor said I'd probably be fine, and I was happy because it meant I'd get to see my grandkids grow up. Isabel. Lucas. I called Wesley to tell him, not because I wanted anything, just because he's my son, and I thought he should know. My voice dropped. 3 weeks later, a bank called to tell me someone was trying to drain my life savings, and that someone was Wesley. He forged my signature, created fake medical records declaring me terminally ill, filed paperwork to have me declared incapacitated. I looked at Wesley holding his gaze even though he couldn't hold mine. You tried to take everything from me, not just the money, my autonomy, my dignity, my medical decision-making, my freedom. And when that didn't work, you broke into my house in the middle of the night. Wesley sobbed openly. I turned back to the jury, tears streaming down my face. Here's what breaks my heart. I would have helped him. Not $85,000, I'm not a fool. But something. A loan, bankruptcy advice, help with the kids, gambling treatment. Something. He didn't ask because he didn't want help. He wanted easy money. I looked at Judge Thornton. Your Honor, I'm not here to ask for mercy for Wesley. He's 40 years old. He made choices. Choices have consequences. That's what I taught him when he was 8, and that's what he needs to learn again now. But I want to say this. I looked back at Wesley, my voice softening. And somewhere inside that man is the 8-year-old boy who felt good about doing the right thing, who helped me build birdhouses in the garage, who was proud of his father. I don't know if that boy is still in there. I don't know if he can come back. But I have to believe he can. Because if I don't believe that, then I've lost my son forever. and I'm not ready to do that. I addressed the jury one final time. So whatever you decide, I'll respect it. Wesley broke the law. He hurt me. He betrayed me. He deserves consequences. But he's still my son. And that's something fathers can't stop being, even when their sons stop being sons. The silence in the courtroom felt sacred. Judge Thornton had tears in her eyes. Several jurors were wiping their faces. I stood slowly. My legs shook. Walter stood as I made my way back to the gallery, placing his hand on my shoulder. I couldn't look at Wesley, couldn't see his face, because if I saw him crying, I might walk over there, might put my arms around him, might tell him everything was okay, and it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay, but I had said what I needed to say. The truth, you hurt me. I still love you. Both things can be true, and maybe, just maybe, that truth was enough to build something from someday. Not what we'd had, but something new, something honest. After I testified, the judge called a lunch recess. I couldn't eat anything. Walter tried to get me to have soup at the diner across from the courthouse, but I just sat there with a cup of coffee watching the steam rise. The jury won't take long, Walter said. The evidence is overwhelming. Is that good or bad? I asked. Walter looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. Depends on whether you want your son to go to prison. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. At 2:00, we filed back into the courtroom. The bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict after 90 minutes of deliberation. Judge Thornton entered, and we all stood, then sat. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Thornton asked. The foreman, a middle-aged man in a cardigan, stood. We have, Your Honor. The court clerk took the verdict form and read aloud. On the charge of identity theft, how do you find guilty? On the charge of forgery of instruments, guilty. On the charge of financial exploitation of the elderly, guilty. On the charge of attempted theft over $60,000, guilty. On the charge of violation of a no-contact order, guilty. On the charge of attempted theft of property, guilty. Wesley didn't react. He'd known this was coming. I closed my eyes and felt a single tear track down my cheek. Judge Thornton polled the jury individually, all 12 confirmed. Then she set the sentencing for immediately following, given that both sides had indicated readiness. Mr. Wesley Garrett, please stand, Judge Thornton said. Wesley stood with Landon beside him. The judge looked directly at Wesley. I've presided over many criminal cases, theft, fraud, exploitation. But this case is particularly troubling because of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. You didn't exploit a stranger. You exploited your own father. A man who raised you, taught you right from wrong, and who by his own testimony would have helped you if you'd simply asked. The prosecution presented evidence of your desperation, gambling debts, threats from creditors. I acknowledge those circumstances. Judge Thornton paused, looking at her notes. I've read the reports about your gambling addiction, the threatening messages, the deadline pressures you faced. Those circumstances explain your panic. They do not excuse your choices. You chose to forge documents, create fake medical records, attempt to have your father declared incapacitated, violate court orders, break into his home. Each of those was a choice. Choices that prioritized your problems over your father's dignity. She paused again, and when she spoke, her voice softened slightly. However, I also heard your father's statement, a statement that showed both pain and hope. He asked me to consider treatment alongside punishment. Judge Thornton held up a piece of paper. He wrote a letter asking that any sentence include treatment for gambling addiction and financial responsibility counseling. She looked back at Wesley. Considering everything, the severity of the crimes, the vulnerable victim, your lack of prior criminal record, your remorse, and your father's request, the court sentences you as follows. 4 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. Wesley's head dropped. My eyes closed tight. You will be eligible for parole after serving 18 months contingent upon successful completion of a gambling addiction treatment program, financial responsibility counseling, maintenance of good behavior, and restitution of $15,000 to Marshal Garrett for legal fees and damages. Additionally, 5 years supervised probation following release. Happy to. Permanent no-contact order regarding financial or medical information. You are permanently barred from accessing or attempting to access Marshal Garrett's financial or medical information. Only supervised visitation with your children until parole completion. Judge Thornton leaned forward slightly. Mr. Garrett, your father gave you something in this courtroom that you didn't give him a chance. He asked for treatment, not just punishment. Don't waste it. This court is adjourned. The bailiff approached Wesley with handcuffs. Wesley turned to look at me one last time. Dad, thank you, I'm sorry. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. They led Wesley through the side door to the holding area. I sat back down, not yet able to stand. Walter sat beside me. 4 years. With parole eligibility after 18 months, he could be out by summer of 2024. That's not as bad as it could have been, I said. Catherine Monroe approached. Mr. Garrett, I want you to know your statement made the difference. The judge wouldn't have included treatment requirements without your words. I nodded, still watching the door Wesley had disappeared through. Outside the courthouse, the January cold hit me like a wall. I stood on the steps, trying to remember where I'd parked. Then I heard it. Grandpa, Isabel and Lucas were running up the steps. Monica was behind them, pulling her coat tight. The kids crashed into me, arms wrapping around my waist. Or Grandpa, Mom said Dad has to go away for a while, Isabel said, looking up at me with her mother's eyes. Is he okay? I knelt down, knees creaking, and looked at my granddaughter. 12 years old. Her father had just been sentenced to prison. What do you say? Your dad made some very bad choices, I told her. And bad choices have consequences. But now he's getting help, and he's still your dad. Lucas, 9 years old, asked, Are you mad at him? I thought about it. Was I? Yes, I said honestly. I'm very mad, but I still love him. Both those things can be true. Isabel hugged me tighter. Will you forgive him? Monica's eyes met mine over the kids' heads. She wanted to know too. I'm trying, sweetheart, I said. It takes time, but I'm trying. For 6 months, I told myself I wouldn't visit. I said Wesley needed to serve his sentence without me softening the consequences. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them alone. I made it through February, March, April, May, and June. Then one Saturday morning in July, I woke up thinking about what Isabel had asked me at Easter. Grandpa, does Dad know you still love him? I hadn't answered then. That morning, I climbed into my truck and drove 2 hours west to West Tennessee State Prison. The drive gave me too much time to think. Highway 40 stretched flat, and endless summer heat already shimmering off the asphalt. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, trying to understand why I was doing this. I wasn't doing it for Wesley, not entirely. I was doing it for myself, for Isabel, for the part of me that couldn't let go completely, even when letting go would have been easier. The last time I'd seen my son, he was in handcuffs being led through a side door. 6 months ago. 6 months of silence. 6 months of wondering whether he was changing or just counting days. The prison appeared on the horizon, gray, concrete, razor wire guard towers. I parked and sat in my truck for several minutes, engine off, gathering myself. Then I went inside. The process was mechanical. ID check, visitor log, phone and wallet into a locker, metal detector, pat down. Instructions, no physical contact, 30 minutes, only stay seated. The waiting room held other families' wives with children, elderly parents, exhausted faces. I wasn't the only father here. That didn't make it easier, but it made it less lonely. Marshal Garrett, a guard, called. I followed him into the visitation room. Gray walls, plastic chairs divided by glass, phones hanging on both sides. Station 7. I sat down and waited. The door opposite opened. Guard Kenneth Wade led Wesley in. My first thought was how much weight he'd lost. His orange jumpsuit hung loose. His hair was cut short. But something else had changed. His eyes were clearer, his posture calmer. He looked present in a way I hadn't seen in years. We picked up the phones. Silence stretched between us. You came, Wesley said. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, I replied. He looked down, then back up. How are you, the cancer? Finished treatment in November. I'm in remission. Doing well, Wesley cried. I'm really glad. I'm glad you're okay. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. We made small talk about the heat, about July. Then Wesley took a breath. I'm in a program here. Gambling addiction treatment. Court mandated, but I needed it. Are you going regularly? Twice a week. Group sessions. Other men like me. Is it helping? Yes. It's hard. Admitting I'm an addict. That I chose gambling over everything, my marriage, my kids, and you. But I'm learning. About triggers. About the lies. About how I avoided feelings. What feelings, I asked? Failure. Disappointment. Feeling like I was never good enough. He hesitated. Like I never lived up to you. That hit me harder than I expected. Wesley, I never asked you to be anything except honest. I know that now. But I thought I had to be successful to deserve your respect. And when I failed, I couldn't face you. I got your letters, I said. You read them, all of them, and they sounded honest. I'm trying to stop lying, he said. To myself, most of all. Good. I took a breath. You need to understand something. I'm here. But that doesn't mean everything is fixed. I know, when you get out, if you're paroled, you don't touch my money. You don't manage anything. No second chances with my finances. I understand. And you don't guilt me for boundaries. You made these choices. Yes, sir. The silence afterward was steady, not tense. Then I softened. I'll visit. Not every week. But maybe once a month. Wesley cried again. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. Yes, I said, it is. The guard tapped the glass. Time was up. We stood on opposite sides. Dad, Wesley asked, will you come back? I looked at my son, 40 years old, in prison, trying to change. Next month, I said. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just presence. Sometimes that's all you can give. Sometimes it's enough to begin. 2 years can change everything. 2 years ago, I sat in a courtroom and watched my son get sentenced to prison. 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost him forever. Now it's April 2025, a Saturday morning, spring sunlight streaming through the garage door. And I'm learning that forever isn't as permanent as it sounds. You can't rebuild a broken relationship into what it was that's gone. But you can build something new, smaller maybe, more careful, but real. 18 months after sentencing, Wesley's parole hearing happened. September 2024. I wrote a letter to the parole board explaining he'd completed every program: gambling treatment, financial counseling, good behavior. I wrote, he's still my son. Mistakes shouldn't be the end of someone's story. The board approved parole with conditions: employment, weekly check-ins, continued counseling, no contact with my finances. October 15th, 2024, Wesley was free. I picked him up outside West Tennessee State Prison. He'd expected Monica. When he saw my truck, he stopped dead. I rolled down the window. Get in. We drove to a diner. Over coffee, I slid an envelope across the table: apartment address in Antioch, lease, with my name as guarantor, first month's rent paid. After this, you're on your own. You pay rent. You work. You rebuild. Wesley started crying. Dad, I don't know how to thank. Don't thank me. Prove to me I didn't waste my forgiveness. 6 months passed. Wesley got a job with Mike, an old friend who ran a framing crew. Hard work. Honest work. We saw each other at Easter with Isabel and Lucas' supervised visitation. The kids were cautious but warming up. Now it's April. I'm in my garage working on a birdhouse for Mrs. Palmer when I hear a knock on the doorframe. Wesley stands there in dusty work clothes, tired, but it's the honest kind of tired. Hey, Dad, hope it's okay I dropped by. It's fine. He holds out an envelope. First installment. $200 cash. Restitution. $200 a month. I know it'll take 60-something months to pay back $15,000, but I'm starting. I look at the money. Look at him. You're doing construction. Yeah, Mike hired me. Framing crew. It's hard but honest. Well, Mike's a good man. He said you called him, asked if he had room for me. I don't confirm or deny. What are you working on? He looks at my workbench. What are you making? Birdhouse for Mrs. Palmer's garden. Wesley hesitates. Need help. I pause, weighing it. Then, you remember how... He smiles faintly. You taught me when I was 8. I hand him sandpaper. Start with this. Smooth the edges. We work side by side in comfortable silence. Wesley sands carefully. I measure cuts. After a while, I saw Isabel and Lucas last week. Supervised visit. How'd it go? Hard. Lucas asked why I went away. I told him the truth, that I made bad choices and had to face consequences. What did he say? He asked if I was done making bad choices. And you said, I said I'm trying, every day. We keep working. Afternoon sun cuts through the garage door. Sawdust catches the light. We finish the birdhouse together. Wesley holds it up to check the angles. Dad, I need to say this. Thank you for not giving up on me, for visiting me in prison, for helping me get the apartment, for calling Mike, for this. He gestures at the garage, the work we're doing. I stop and look at him. Don't thank me yet. Prove to me I didn't waste my time. That's what you do with second chances. You prove they were worth giving. I will, I promise. Good. We go back to work. Wesley runs the sandpaper along the grain, the same motion I taught him over 30 years ago. A small smile crosses my face. The first genuine smile I've given Wesley in 2 years. People ask if I regret turning Wesley in. Regret the trial. Regret him going to prison. I don't. He needed real consequences, the kind you can't talk your way out of. But do I regret giving him another chance? Never. Being a father means loving someone even when they don't deserve it. It means holding them accountable and holding space for redemption. My son tried to inherit from me before I died, tried to take my money when I was sick. Instead, he inherited something I never expected to give him: understanding. That trust must be earned, that consequences are real, that love doesn't quit even when you deserve to be abandoned. 4 years ago, Marianne died. 2 years ago, Wesley tried to take everything I had left. Today, I'm building birdhouses with my son in the garage, just like when he was 8 and the world was simpler. We're not fully healed. Trust hasn't returned completely. Maybe it never will be like it was. But we're here, together, building something. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. And to you listening to this story, remember this: 2 years ago, I stood in that courtroom thinking I'd lost my son forever. I prayed hard, asking God why this was happening to me, why my own son would do this. But God didn't answer with words. He answered with time. When I visited Wesley in prison that first time, I prayed again. Lord, give me strength not to walk away. And you know what he did. Not all at once, not with lightning or miracles, but in small moments, a conversation through glass, a letter written in honest words. A son who finally stopped lying to himself. And now building birdhouses together in my garage, I thank God every single day. Not because everything is perfect, it's not. But because I didn't give up. Because consequences and love can coexist. Because redemption is real if you're willing to do the work. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Don't wait for a crisis to have honest conversations with the people you love. Don't assume they'll ask for help when they need it. Don't let pride, yours or theirs, build walls that take years to tear down. Wesley didn't come to me because he was ashamed. I didn't push harder because I was hurt. And we both almost lost everything because of it. So here's my advice. Don't be like me. Don't wait until someone forges your signature to realize something's wrong. Check in. Ask the hard questions. Be the kind of person your family can come to when they're drowning, not just when everything's fine. And if you're on the other side of this, if you're the one hiding debt addiction or desperation, don't wait until it's too late. The truth always comes out. Always. The only question is whether you'll tell it yourself or let it explode in your face. My personal belief, love without accountability isn't love, it's enabling. And accountability without love isn't justice, it's cruelty. You need both. Always both. So if this story moved, you taught you something, or made you think twice about the relationships in your own life, leave a comment below telling me what you took away from Marshall and Wesley's story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the stories that matter. Thank you truly for staying with me until the end. For listening to a father's pain, a son's mistakes, and the long road back to something that looks like hope. One final note. The stories I share here often contain fictionalized elements crafted for educational purposes. If these narratives aren't for you, I respect that. Feel free to explore other content that better fits what you're looking for. Until next time, take care of each other. And remember, it's never too late to build something new.